Despite U.S. President Donald Trump promising America first and a more isolationist ideology during the elections, he continues his interventionist foreign policy. Washington is sending strong signals across several global fronts, from warnings directed at Iran to the capturing of the Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and the continued pressure on the interim Venezuelan government for oil deals. His foreign policy shifts didn't just stop there. He made statements that he was also intending to take Greenland from Denmark, an ally, by any means possible. The administration is relying heavily on public pressure and direct rhetoric. While Trump insists these moves protect U.S. interests, allies are responding with caution, and questions are growing about the limits of the power-based diplomacy. Has his America First definition been redefined? Are public threats replacing traditional diplomacy? And do these signals amount to a strategy or a crisis management by pressure? Welcome to In Depth. In a wide-ranging interview with the New York Times, the U.S. President Donald Trump declared that his power is constrained only by his own morality, saying that his own morality is the only thing that can stop him from unleashing U.S. power globally. Trump bluntly downplayed the role of international law, asserting that its relevance depends on how it's defined and that he would be the ultimate arbitrator of when it applies to the United States. The interview underscored Trump's belief that national strength and military might should trump treaties and conventions, a worldview reflected in his aggressive actions abroad, including the recent operations targeting Venezuela's leadership and the bold talk about Greenland. He also signaled indifference towards the looming expiration of the U.S.-Russia nuclear arms control treaty, saying a better agreement could follow. Trump's posture suggests a presidency in which conventional legal and diplomatic constraints are subordinated to his personal instincts and strategic objectives. And The Guardian reports that Trump's foreign policy is largely shaped by a sprawling inner and outer circle from family members and Mar-a-Lago guests, members of Congress and right-wing media figures, rather than a coherent ideology. The influence network has guided decisions ranging from military strikes to Syria and Nigeria to overthrowing the Venezuelan leader. Marco Rubio, serving as both Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, has become especially influential, orchestrating the Venezuela operation and advising on Latin American affairs, while others push competing agendas globally. Critics say this loose, freewheeling structure leaves U.S. policy unpredictable, with decisions reflecting Trump's personal whim and the interests of those around him, rather than strategic consistency. Despite the chaos, some officials note that the administration's inner circle now functions more systemically than in Trump's first term, with advisors presenting options and structuring decisions, but the overall approach remains mercurial, opportunistic, and highly individualized.
President Donald Trump is reshaping how the United States signals power abroad. In recent days, Trump has issued strong statements across several foreign policy fronts. On Iran, he expressed support for protest movements while warning Tehran over its regional rule. The message was forceful, but deliberately open-ended. In Venezuela, Washington escalated pressure before signaling restraint. Trump described the military escalation as necessary, then emphasized limits to further action. The shift suggests pressure is being applied selectively rather than continuously. Attention then turned north, as Trump said the United States would act on Greenland regardless of opposition. The remarks sparked concern in Europe and reignited debate about sovereignty and strategic competition in the Arctic. Across these cases, a pattern is emerging. Public statements are no longer just rhetoric, but act as tools of pressure. Trump has made clear that power, not moral framing, drives his worldview and foreign policy. European responses have been cautious. Allies are uneasy, but reluctant to escalate tensions with Washington. From Middle East to Latin America and the Arctic, the administration is testing how far power signaling can go without formal diplomatic engagement. The central question remains: do these moves reflect the coherent foreign policy strategy or the management of multiple crises through calibrated pressure and public warnings?
To talk to us more about Trump's foreign policy, we're joined from Washington by Ginger Chapman, a lawyer and a political analyst, and Dennis Jeffy, a strategic affairs expert. Thank you both for joining me here on In Depth. Let's start off with you, Ginger. Now, in this recent interview, Trump said that his own morality and his personal judgment is what actually restrains him exercising power around the world, and that basically international law does not necessarily apply to him or the United States. Now, the way he's framed this, how do you see this? What does this mean about the administration and about the idea of accountability in general?
Yes. Well, first, Reham, thank you for having us today, and greetings to your viewers and to your other guests. And, well, it appears that in Trump's interview with the New York Times, he made it clear that we have now abandoned the old post-World War II rules-based order. At one point, early in Trump 2.0, at the beginning of his second term, it appeared that we would be realigning, moving more towards bilateral agreements, and yet still operating within the guidelines of international law for commerce, for diplomatic relations, and even to end the war in Ukraine. However, what we have seen instead is unpredictability and chaos. It should be noted that Donald Trump Jr. at the summit in Doha at the end of 2025 said that the best thing about his father, President Trump, is that he's unpredictable. No one knows what he's going to do. In reality, this is a bad thing. Especially given the dynamic and rapidly changing conditions in the world today, considering the conflicts and how close we are to escalation of global tensions into World War III. Unpredictability is not a good characteristic. This is causing more chaos in the world. We do see that instead of the old rules-based order, we are now moving to rule of the jungle, might makes right. We've seen many American talking heads, journalists saying that there is no more international law. Now we're in the rule of the jungle. We see the United States using military leverage, economic pressure.
But can anyone bring accountability to Trump? That's a question. I mean, even I guess he's not incorrect in saying that it's based on his morality, because can anyone in the world actually, make Trump accountable under international law?
Well, this is what many Americans are wondering. We are saying, where are our Democrats? Where are the other members of the Republican Party who would normally create resistance? We have a two-party system, which is supposed to be a back and forth, a balancing of interests. But instead, as you've noted, our do-nothing Congress here in America appears helpless before Trump. We even see countries such as England and France pressuring Denmark to just give Greenland to President Trump, to not make waves. We see China is trying to determine how best to deal with our erratic trade wars, our tariff regimes. So at this point, it does not seem like anyone is capable of stopping Trump, except for Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, who does whatever he wants and apparently dictates to Trump what American policy in the Middle East is, much to the anger of an increasing number of Americans. But no, we did hear Trump say in that interview that His only constraint is his own morality. And we have seen that Trump has drifted far from his original principles, the principles he campaigned on, peace abroad, prosperity at home. A great example, he said he was going to bring manufacturing back to America,
Yes.
but instead of manufacturing, we're getting weapons production, which is not a strong base or foundation for an
We'll get
economy.
back to the
And he,
idea of the shift in policy, but let's get Dennis's take here. Now, Dennis, Trump is applying public pressure across several regions simultaneously, including on allies when it comes to Greenland, for instance. Do you think that, in your opinion, this makes the US seem more stronger, or is it sort of an overreach for the United States and it's making them more isolated on the world stage?
Marhaba, Reham, good to be with you and with your other guest, and to have the opportunity to talk about these issues for your audience. Trump is defined by two things more than anything else. First and foremost, it is his own self-aggrandizement. Basically, nothing else matters in the entire world with respect to President Trump other than he wants to have a bigger ego, he wants to have more money, he wants to have more prestige, he wants to have perhaps a more positive role in history, which is perhaps the least likely to happen. The other thing is that his strategy...
So you think that he's not going to win the Nobel Peace Prize?
I mean, I certainly would not think it's likely to be done on the merits. Yes. We recently saw with the winner from Colombia, from the opposition, declare that she would share or transfer the Peace Prize to him. And I think those who give out the award just decided that, no, you really don't have the opportunity to do that. But in terms of history, I think history will reflect very, very unfavorably on Trump. In addition to self-aggrandizement, the other thing to remember, I think, about Trump more than anything is that he revels in throwing everyone off balance. And he thinks that with some correctness, he thinks that largely when he throws others off balance, even if he says something that is verifiably crazy, that all the attention turns to him. All of the calculations of what will another country or another organization or another political leader, what will they do? They are taking into calculation, well, what is Trump doing? He's so crazy, we have to figure out what he's doing, and he revels in that attention. The other thing I would point out here is the role in which domestic politics plays in this in a systemic way, and that is political primaries in both parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, particularly for the United States House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. They are determined by voters who are the strongest, most passionate voters who will turn out in their particular political party, more conservative in the Republican Party, more left in the Democratic Party. And what happens is that we nominate individuals, especially in the Republican Party, who see that Trump has such power on the conservative Republican Party base that they will not question, they will not challenge him. That's beginning to change, but it's a severe problem.
Okay, Ginger, let's get your take here now. You heard Dennis there talking about the idea that Trump likes to seem like he's erratic in his behavior and everyone is guessing what he's doing. Now, when it comes to the behavior of Trump, he's also voiced support for protester movements in Iran and issuing warnings against Tehran. And he's given, several mixed messages when it comes to that issue. Is this messaging designed to influence Iran itself or send out a message to multiple audiences at the same time? And is it intended to make the Iranians, I suppose, or the Iranian government feel like they're unsure where they stand when it comes to this issue?
Well, we do know that President Trump likes to threaten. He accomplishes his goals by means of threats and pressure. When he was first elected, the American people believed that running our country like a business would be better for us. It would be a break from the old politics. What we have seen is that a country this large cannot be run like a business where everyone swears fealty to one CEO, chief executive officer. In fact, our country is less unified, more divided, more fractured, and more politically violent than at almost any other time in our history, other than perhaps the Civil War in 1865. And one thing Trump has done as president is he has shown the limits of American power. Trump has tried to bully and intimidate other countries, other negotiating partners, even to the use of force, military strikes during negotiations. However, what this has highlighted is that the military, the American military, is no longer the world's mightiest power. America is no longer the world's superpower, and America is resisting this new multipolar world with all of our might. And what we have seen in our military conflicts, notably against Yemen in the spring of 2025, where we spent several $billions in 2 months, lost 3 fighter jets, and essentially Trump gave in. He realized there was no way we could just bomb Yemen into submission, so we reached an agreement with them. And this is what we are seeing happening in our trade wars with China. Essentially, Trump could not match China's use of tariffs. So what we have done in response is pivoting away from using China for material resources and invaded Venezuela, kidnapped President Maduro, and now we believe that we can use Venezuela's resources. I should note that I'm a supporter of President Trump. I voted for President Trump. However, there are many, many Republicans in the party that are looking at this administration and wondering, essentially, President Trump's focus on foreign policy has not advanced America's interests.
This isn't what
Indeed,
he ran as, right? Isn't his focus, or his focus during the campaign, was basically focusing internally rather than externally? Are Republicans happy about this?
Many Americans, not just Republicans, but many Americans are unhappy. Historically, when a president focuses on foreign wars, that means he does not accomplish very much, if anything at all, domestically. And we see that domestically, things are a mess at home. In fact, you mentioned Iran and the protests in Iran, and President Trump threatening the Ayatollah, if you shoot your protesters, we will strike you hard. Well, within 24 hours of President Trump putting out that Truth Social statement, we had a protester here at home in Minnesota shot by a federal immigration agent, and then the very next day we had 2 more protesters in the state of Oregon were shot to death by other federal immigration agents. So we are actually shooting our own protesters here at home. Whether those are justifiable or not remains to be seen. That will be determined by a court of law. However, here at home, Trump is losing control. We are seeing increased protests. We are seeing Republicans leave Congress and the House of Representatives in protest. Your other guest mentioned that many Republicans are afraid to stand up to Trump. We see an example of this with Senator Thomas Massie of Kentucky, who is resisting Trump's foreign aggression, and the Israeli lobby, Miriam Adelson, large Israeli donors, are now pouring millions of dollars into Kentucky to defeat Thomas Massie. Many people believe that the good people of Kentucky will see through this big money blitz and vote for their man.
Yes.
However, what this shows is that conditions in America are spiraling out of control, in addition to the disorder and chaos that we are also seeing on the world stage.
Yes.
America is becoming more isolated. Indeed, our allies are unable to rely on us. Our adversaries are apprehensive. And essentially, this is the new Trump world order, might makes right, much to the dismay of many Republicans and Americans at home.
All right, Dennis, let's get your take here as well. Now, in the same interview, Trump talked about, the real constraint on his powers as commander-in-chief is just him, basically. Do you think that this is true, given that now there are reports, for instance, in the Daily Mail about him selecting a special operations commander to basically draw up plans, military plans for Greenland? Is he going to be allowed to do this by Congress? And does he have the power to send out the military to invade Greenland?
One thing that the left said after Trump left office in January of 2021 was that our institutions held, and that despite all the attacks on institutions, despite all of Trump's efforts to obliterate guardrails and take power that should not be held by the president, that our institutions held. And at the time, I thought that the left was mistaken in saying that. I think that we were lucky in his first term. The insurrection that he summoned to happen to commit violence against the U.S. Capitol, including threats to hang his own vice president. I think that we were lucky that it was not worse. It was not because institutions held. We were simply lucky that it did not spiral even worse, more out of control. In Greenland, I think that he is vulnerable with members of the U.S. House and the Senate, including in the Republican Party, starting to speak up now more than ever before. And I think that's happening for two reasons. One, I think he's out of control. He's going way too far afield in trying to grab power for himself. And even Republicans who have recognized that he has power over their own constituents, excuse me, they realize that in 2026, this year, that the Republican majority in the House of Representatives in particular is vulnerable to giving way to the Democrats taking power. And so they find their spine because of their own political self-interest.
So do you think that he has the ability to enter Greenland militarily without Congress's approval?
Well, I think of the expression "ask for forgiveness, not for permission." So no, he's not allowed to do that, but you can violate the law until you're caught and until you're stopped. And he is the president, and the president has an enormous amount of power. So if the president does something that is unconstitutional, you need control of the apparatus of government in order to stop him. And that may well include, in the most extreme example, the possibility that Republicans support impeachment of him at some point. I'm not predicting it. I'm not proposing it at this time. But there is a degradation of his own political standing in the United States. His standing in the polls is lower than at any point in either of his two presidencies. And cabinet members could conceivably leave, as they did in the weeks before the end of his first term. As late as it was, they resigned days and weeks before the January 20th of 2021 because of his role in the insurrection on January 6th of that year.
Okay, Ginger, let's get your take here. I'll ask you about Greenland a bit later, but you talked a bit about Venezuela there and what happened in Venezuela. Now, initially, Trump had escalated pressure on Venezuela and said there's a possibility of further action there. But then again, he talked that back, basically. What does this say about the plans for Venezuela, and what does this mean for him politically, both at home and abroad? How is this perceived?
Well, with respect to plans, what we have seen is that Trump has no plans, no strategy. He appears to be winging it, freestyle, playing by ear as he goes along. I just want to comment, your other guest made a very important point about institutions. It should be noted that American institutions, as well as our international institutions, World Health Organization, International Monetary Funds, the Bank of International Settlements, many of our world's social, economic, political, military institutions were created at the end of World War II. We are in a very different era now. The world has changed. Many institutions domestically and globally are weakening, are crumbling. Many of them their operations are no longer suitable for the world in which we live. This is a global phenomenon, not just American. Our institutions are weak globally and they are crumbling, and we are in the dynamic process of a reordering global alignments, geopolitical, geoeconomic alignments. We are in an historical reordering phase of the world right now. And this is reflected in President Trump's actions. A great example, Venezuela. We started out just bombing, striking small boats offshore. This turned into a massive military naval blockade, which turned into piracy on the high seas, America seizing oil tankers, which evolved into invasion, kidnapping, arrest, capture of President Maduro against international laws, against American constitutional and congressional acts, which speaks to what your other guest said. Right now, our president is operating outside of the Constitution, outside of our laws, and in contravention of Congress. However, he does not appear to have a plan to substitute for the international rule of law. We are just making this up as we go along. Trump is doing what seems to work, and this speaks to something else your other guest mentioned. As far as Trump's personnel, in his second term, Trump made the same mistake as his first term. He surrounded himself by personnel. This time he picked people who were loyal to him. He picked people that were vetted by his Israeli donors for loyalty to Israel. None of his cabinet was vetted for competence, maturity, or the ability to do their job, which is why we see Secretary of War Pete Hegseth acting like a cheerleader and doing what Trump wants instead of being a seasoned military veteran voice of reason, advising Trump on the risks and benefits of military operations. So as far as we see, Hegseth is incompetent. Rubio is more driven by his familial revenge against Cuba, which is why he's focusing on Latin America. We see members such as Tulsi Gabbard, who is viewed as a voice of reason. She has been sidelined during our operations in Venezuela. Tulsi Gabbard had been banished to Hawaii. She was cut out of the loop. So we see that Trump's personnel picks are not supporting him and giving him advice and seasoned counsel, which is why Trump has become a one-man show. He cannot rely on his personnel for advice or wisdom, and he is relying on himself, which is why he feels that he is his own moral authority, and this does not bode well for America or the world.
All right, Dennis, let's get your take here. Now, in the interview, Trump emphasized strength and national power as the key limits or guides for the U.S. actions in general. Does this represent a continuation of the idea of America first, or a new approach where power, not doctrine, shapes the U.S. foreign policy, given that the term gunboat diplomacy has been, making the rounds right now in every news outlet?
The notion of America first as a political platform that Trump has represented has always been a fallacy. What he sought to do successfully, he did, in the 2016 election, as well as unsuccessfully in 2020 and originally in the 2024 election, is that he has sought to appeal to Americans who want the United States to be focusing on the needs of Americans, which makes sense, but to the extent that some people who feel that credible folks throughout the country and the world, he goes, I think, to such an extent that his political ideology, as stated, has been criticized as isolationist. But he is not isolationist. He is not America first. He is attempting to advance the interests of the oil industry, of the U.S. oil industry in Venezuela. He is attempting to advance the economic profit interests of real estate entities and anyone who he can partner with in Gaza, which he sees as, in his own words, beachfront property, or his family's words, beachfront property. That was his son who said that, and that's a shame.
Yes.
And so it's not an ideology that he actually represents. It was a political strategic ploy to get Americans' votes.
All right, thank you so much. That was Dennis Jeffy, a strategic affairs expert, and Ginger Chapman, a lawyer and political analyst. Thank you both for your insights, and thank you for joining me. This brings us to the end of today's episode of In Depth. I'm Rehan Morsi. Thank you so much for joining us. Stay tuned for more updates here on Qnews.